are in front of a master. Ocean is one of the best MCs in this wonderful collection of wonderful MCs in South Summit, and it's wonderful to see you all so bright and early. I know many of you are very excited about the competition that's coming next, but at the end of the day, you're competing for the attention of these guys. These are the investors. They represent three very major, very significant investment houses in the ecosystem, and it's a privilege to be here today and hear their views. So to start off, everyone's going to introduce themselves, give you a little bit of their background, why they have chosen the career that they have chosen, what are their upsides, downsides, and the investment criteria in a very summary way of what they're looking for. So I'm going to start off with Nicholas to talk a little bit about Eurazeo.
Okay, hello, hi everybody. My name is Nicolas. I'm a VC and investor at Eurazeo, based in Paris, but we're investing all over Europe. Eurazeo is one of the largest pan-European VC, investing in seed, Series A, and Series B. We also have a growth team doing later stage, but I'm not ready to write such big checks, so I stay with the early stage. And personally, I've been a VC for the past 10 years, and I've invested in a lot of fintech companies, from payment in France like Lydia, to Bitcoin Ledger, did the seed round in Ledger, to buy now pay later more recently, and some insurtech. So I've been following the space for the past 10 years, and as we discussed before, it evolved a lot, and happy to discuss with all of you.
And now Oscar, again, a serial investor and in the fintech space.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see that Madrid didn't kill you last night. So yeah, I'm the managing partner at Rakuten Capital, which is the investment arm of Rakuten, a Japanese e-commerce play. At the peak, we had about 4 billion in assets. Normally, we invest in consumer internet, digital platforms, marketplaces, fintech, the US and Europe, specifically for this space, with a couple of notable exits or unicorns such as Upstart in the US or Currency Cloud in the UK.
Wonderful. Thank you, Oscar. And now over to Brian.
Hey, morning all. I'm Brian McLaughlin, and to answer your question, I'm an accidental investor. I don't think I ever chose to go down this route. But after a career as an economist and a management consultant, I think the third worst thing you can do is to be an investor in that list. But on a serious note, White Star Capital, we are a kind of global VC, North America, Europe, and Asia. We have a local presence. And we're really investing in venture and digital assets. That's the core of the business. And our mantra, however cheesy it may sound, is to actually help the local champions become global leaders. So whether you're, I don't know, living in Bilbao in your basement coding, our job is that you can become a global leader, and that's a ethos that we work with entrepreneurs on.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. So the title of this panel today is "What's the next milestone in fintech?" And some people may consider PayPal as being the grandfather now of fintech, which just shows how long this fintech space has been around for. We've seen very rapid changes beginning sort of 2011, 2010. It really depends on when you start the cycle. And there have been a lot of very exciting developments, many of which you are either a customer of or have great awareness of. So the question is, what comes next? What's the next milestone? What's the direction fintech is traveling in? And what are the areas that investors are going to be looking at if you are a future entrepreneur who's working in the fintech space? So I'm going to invert the order now. I'm going to start with Brian to give us his views on what the next milestone is going to be.
Well, that's a lot of pressure because it's probably going to be totally incorrect. I mean, maybe a non-obvious one to start. I think the future of work generally with DAOs and new ways of organizing economic activity. I think that creates huge opportunities. If you look at Europe, a big boom in our innovation and prosperity happened with the joint stock company all those years ago. So I think new ways of organizing economic activity, new ways of organizing digital assets, and traditional finance. And I won't steal Nicolas' thunder about orchestration, but I think this whole, the future of work is definitely going to be an exciting space around infrastructure and creating these, solely digital, corporations and ways of organizing our activity. Whether it's pay to earn or whatever. I think we're, there's a golden era potentially. So that's an interesting milestone I've been looking for.
So Brian, so I think that's an excellent one. I think the future of work is clearly one of the next new milestones. I think the whole part of the development of the financial infrastructure and the new asset categories is going to be one that is going to be explored in a lot of depth. And Oscar, I'd like your views. It can be same, similar, it's an open panel today.
Yeah, I guess it is sort of similar. I'm going to give you two, right? So if you look at, and you mentioned 2010, 11, 12, right? I guess, fintech has been evolving. So we've had these waves of innovation. And in many ways, the biggest categories, if you think about lending, payments, stockbroking, remittances, everything has been taken right now, and some of the players that matter have become very much ubiquitous. Not to mention the fact that the financial industry, although and not everywhere, right? If you think about insurance, they're still sort of catching up, but definitely the banks have polished their technologies. Now you take any app for most banks and it kind of works, and is there like a fintech startup or a bank? Then when you look at the back end or actually dealing with the things that they don't do is fairly painful. But yeah, there's been a lot of crossover. So what we've seen in fintech normally right now is kind of like little add-ons, mostly in the B2B space, that have made some of these services better. And then obviously there's been the blockchain, crypto, we spoke about, DAOs, now there's like, the great craze about DeFi. Well, will DeFi really work or not? So much decentralization. Effectively, you kind of like need more centralization in finance. But the two things that are definitely in the order of the day, one is the crossover that you have between e-commerce and fintech and finance. So the lines are becoming a lot more blurry right now, as for whether it's a fintech firm or an e-commerce firm that's effectively funding you, and how they partner up. I think if you guys read the press regularly, the big news was that Apple now is actually entering into the buy now, pay later space. Ironically, as things are when regulators are cracking down, and when there's going to be a lot of payoffs with people not exactly paying for what's not paying later, but credit. And the last one I will mention, which is quite interesting, which my team has been spending a lot of time on, is sustainability and climate tech. So you have very interesting fintech applications, not just counting carbon credits, but actually like figuring out how we can do something good with fintech for the improvement of the planet. And there's a lot of visionaries, a lot of luminaries, and a lot of people who are a little bit gone, but there's great applications and some great companies that are really worth taking a look at.
So Oscar, thank you. And again, I mean, you've touched on things that are very dear to my heart. So my background, I was an investment banker in the traditional world for a very long time. So Schroders, Citigroup, and I moved into e-commerce because there was nothing happening in fintech in 99, 2000. So my only option was to move into e-commerce. I joined something called Lastminutecom, which was one of the first European unicorns with that team, which is completely an e-commerce platform. The same theory applied, though. You know, it was the travel industry that we were disrupting, very small margins, very similar to the financial world, payments that you mentioned, remittances, money transfer. So the fintechs have been able to operate in terms of improving customer experience in this very low margin environment which has existed until now. Obviously, that low margin environment is about to change. So that's going to have a significant impact on how the traditional players are operating versus the fintech players. But I think that that approach to the world that you talk about, integrating with sustainability, that in terms of the financial carbon imprint is becoming so much more important to investors' decision, is a very exciting future avenue for many fintechs to operate in. But before I take away Nicholas' thunder, because I know Nicholas has also been very involved in the fintech world since the early stages, what's your view on the future?
Don't worry, it's bright future. Even if nowadays there is ups and downs in the market, there is, I mean, financial market is a huge institution to be changed, and as we were discussing before, it takes time. Even if we are in the startup world, to change giant players like bank, insurance, it takes time, but it's moving forward. One of the big milestone we see it more and more, like it was a little bit covered before, like personalized. I mean, integrate fintech with the processes of companies. So you can, as you say, we see bank for e-commerce. So it just announced this morning, Juni, the Nordics, that raised 100 million to do just a bank for e-commerce. We saw also a lot of like banks for independent worker. So you do a fintech product, but not an horizontal one, but a vertical one for one specific industry, and then you move upflow and downflow, because at the end of the day, fintech, it's about moving money around, or moving credit, moving debt, and so once you enter vertical, you can move up and south. We see and down. We see it a lot in the B2B payment space, when it's officially B2B payment, but at the end of the day, it's invoice management, it's credit, and those kind of things. And then the other big trend we see, and it's not only in fintech, it's actually in every industry. It's because there is API everywhere. There is a rise of what we call orchestration. So there is always buzzword in tech, but right now it's orchestration, but that actually makes sense. It's now that you have plenty pieces of software doing little processes, you need an orchestration layer to make sure that things move in the right direction, and you can recreate new processes on top of the old ones. And so this is why there is a hope for entrepreneurs. There is always new business to be built.
Okay, wonderful, Nicholas. Now I'm just going to ask the room, how many of you are entrepreneurs? And if you are, can you put your arm up, please? Okay. How many of you would like to be an entrepreneur? Oh, the same number. So the others are corporates. How many of you are corporates? Okay, quite a big overlap between the entrepreneurs and the corporates. I really like that. And that was the point that we were trying to get to, is that one of the questions that I have is that I think all three, I mean, Brian and Oscar and Nicholas have talked about the unbundling of the fintech, and that different areas have been worked on, and Oscar sort of says it quite bluntly, I think we've sort of run the mile on the separate areas. And Nicholas is talking about the next phase being the orchestration. How do you think the startup world is going to work with the corporate world? How do you see that overlap happening? And how do you see your role as VCs, investors, in that slightly different community? Nicholas, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, well, I mean, before being a VC, believe it or not, I worked for La Poste, which is like Correos, yes, and which is a large corporate, 200,000 employees. And at the time, I was like a innovation manager, I mean, whatever. I was a relationship between startups and corporate. The number one issue is that those two people don't live in the same space-time. because when you're in a big corporation, and it makes sense, you have meeting in 1 month because everybody is around, and in 1 month a startup can boom or die. But anyway, the progress were big in the recent years. We see more and more of our startups signing deals with large corporations because those guys know that innovation comes from small players and they're ready to integrate new products easily, to create sandbox area, to try new things. So things are improving well on that side. Not specifically in fintech, like anywhere.
In any investment. Okay, that's interesting. Oscar, what's your view?
Yeah, my view is that you gotta look for margins, right? So there's been a lot of myopia, take it away from fintech. Think about ride sharing, the deliveries, travel. Like everybody thinks like, oh, it's gonna be like the new panacea where you're just gonna make so much money. Well, you do and you don't, right? You gotta get like large volumes, right? But like in the end, markets are very efficient, so things converge to the mean. And what is effectively a low margin business will remain a low margin business, right? So I think that the gems actually would be or think about sectors that traditionally have been higher margin, like software and effectively solutions. And to Nicolas' point, things that can integrate easily, right? Because one of the things, you spoke about your prior role. At some point, 10 years ago, I actually was the CEO of a savings bank, right? And I thought, okay, like you're running this place, you can just like change things, you snap your fingers, and then implementation, integration, right? Getting like the painful IT process takes ages, right? So think about solutions that you can integrate easily, that have high margins, and that you can actually sell. So those would be like my 3 pieces of advice.
So, I think that's a very good point. Yeah. So while e-commerce and fintech are aligning in terms of what to look out for is the big margin areas, which is SaaS or B2B applications, orchestration. Brian?
Yeah, I won't repeat all the great points there, but one thing is traditional finance isn't dead. I think it's easy to get seduced into thinking that innovation in fintech is only for startups. And I think for small companies, we talk about bundling and unbundling. Don't overlook partnerships, because distribution is key to getting your technology in the, Joshua's point about selling, partnerships are very key for younger companies to think about. And the second point that I would make is that, to your point, Tara, about bundling and unbundling, remember your customers buy solution. Yep. In open finance, embedded finance, giving your customers, akin to going to a restaurant with a very long menu. Some customers find that very frustrating. So as we think about the future and the current environment, all the great points about margins and business model, but remember, your customers don't want a soup of APIs. They want a solution to a problem, and bear that in mind when you're, if you're in that embedded finance, open banking space.
So no, that's excellent. So we're going to wrap up now.
Yep.
So you've got 30 seconds each to give one piece of advice to your audience, the same way that you asked them. One piece of advice to future entrepreneurs. Brian, you go first.
In 10 seconds. Don't panic. We didn't talk about the macro, but this is a correction. So if any of you are old enough, business cycles do exist. So as an entrepreneur, my only advice right now is don't panic, corrections are natural, and focus on your long-term North Star of adding value.
Fantastic.
Yeah, actually, I'd say be creative, right? Like every single negative situation is actually an amazing opportunity, right? So creativity will get you a long way, and that's where the best startups come from.
Fantastic, love that.
Yeah, no, same kind of ideas. It's focus on one problem that you can solve, small, but like automate it or make it like transparent or with less cost. Start with one, don't go with complicated, and then build on top of it.
I love this. So don't panic, be creative, focus on one problem, and you'll be very successful. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.